Hi, welcome to today's session brought to you by Adobe and Wacom. I'm Richard Curtis. I look after digital imaging for Adobe in the UK, primarily Photoshop and Lightroom.
My name's David O'Giro. I'm the Channel Development Manager for Wacom. I look after the professional products, so the Intous range, the Cintiq range, and all the accessories and the tools that actually go with them as well.
And today's session will be around the new Intous 5 tablet and the new features inside Photoshop CS6 and Illustrator CS6. So I hope you enjoy that, and we'll see you after demonstrations. Thank you.
What have we done with Wacom Intuos 5? There's a number of different things that we've actually put together within the Intuos 5 tablet. Let's run through a few things. One of them is actually going to be multi-touch. So for the first time we've actually decided to put in 10-finger touch into the Intuos tablets. This will be the Intuos small, Intuos medium and Intuos large. So again here you can see I can work with 1-finger touch. I can also work with 2-finger touch. So again here, if I do want to go off and I want to go into my full screen mode, so full screen mode, again here I can actually scrub around my image as well. We can also do things such as pinching and zooming. So again here I can actually go off, pinch and zoom, just like so. And also what we can do is that we can also rotate. We can actually rotate using 2 hands, so that's not going to be a problem. So again here we can actually go off and rotate. Again we can actually flick up and we can push down as well, so we can actually go to our desktop or many other different types of desktops. We can use Aero as we want to work with within Windows 7, or on our Mac. Again we can use things such as Expose as well. So we've got a whole range of multi-finger gestures where you can actually use your tablet as a mouse, as well as using it for drawing and sketching and everything else like that. We've also changed the buttons. So where we used to have on the Intuos 4 we had OLEDs where you can actually see what the shortcuts are. Now these are actually going to be based on haptic touch, which means that I can rest my finger on each of the buttons and it will actually tell me what that button is physically going to be. And when I do rest my finger on one of the buttons, it will actually appear in orange. And if I do want to use that button, then I press down to actually use that key. So I'm actually resting over the shift key at the moment. If I do want to constrain anything, I then press on it, and then again it can actually work with me like so. So again, the idea behind that is that you don't have to take your eyes off the screen when you work. You don't have to look down at your tablet and then look back at your screen. It doesn't break up the workflow. Also the things that we've actually worked on and dealt with as well is the ability to actually work wirelessly with the tablet as well. This is now you can actually have an option where you can actually place the wireless kit directly into the tablet. So again, if you do want to be completely wireless, again you can work with that with the small, medium and large tablets as well. When it comes down to actually looking at the driver, we've configured these things to work with that as well. So the driver on the Macintosh is actually going to be in System Preferences. If I take a look on a PC, it's going to be in the Control Panel, but they look pretty much identical. So if I actually click on my Wacom tablet, you can actually see that I've actually got the Intuos 5 Touch, which is there, and we've actually got our tools. So again here we've got our function keys. So with our function keys we can actually see what those shortcuts are physically going to be, and if we wanted to program them to be in different things as well. The new thing here is the touch. So here, let's take a look at touch, and you can see that we've got our touch options in there. We've actually got our touch input enabled. We've got standard gestures in there as well. So with those standard gestures you can see it's very similar to a lot of other touch trackpads and built into laptops, or if you actually want to attach to a desktop, 1 finger's there, 2 finger, 3, 4 fingers is actually there as well. But the most interesting thing that we have is my gestures, because what we actually have with my gestures is the ability to put in our own individual shortcuts especially when it comes down to working with things such as Photoshop, Illustrator, etc. We've actually put some default shortcuts in there for Photoshop users anyway. So if we take a little look at 5 fingers here with the swipe down, and we'll take a look in the settings, what we've got are Photoshop shortcuts. And with those Photoshop shortcuts, you can actually see, if I actually leave those open, we've got save, we've got step back, step forward, we can show and hide our panels, we can stamp all visible layers, all by using a swipe down movement using 5 fingers as well. To actually prove that this is actually true, I can actually go into About, I can go into Diagnose, and with Diagnose you can see that we've got this whole new area called Touch Info. So where you can actually see me going for a status of 1 or 2, those are actually my fingers just very gently brushing actually on the tablet itself. But if I actually start putting my fingers onto the tablet itself, you can see that I can put on 1, 2, I'm actually going to move the mouse icon out a little bit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you can actually see I can actually have 10 fingers actually all on the tablet, all on its own, with the tablet actually recognising each individual one as well. So again, nothing at this present moment in time is 10 finger touch, but what we want to do is we want to future-proof ourselves. So if there are other applications, if Adobe decide to make other applications, or anybody else wants to make any other applications, we're ready for that. So we can actually see what we can do in terms of development work.
Cool, so here we are with Photoshop CS6, and what I want to do today is to show you some new features with the Wacom Intuos 5, as well as the new brush features in Photoshop CS6. I'm just going to load a Bristle Brush, and in the Bristle Brush I'm going to change the shape. Now we've got multiple shapes that we can use in CS6. We've got the round fan, we've got the round angle, we've got flat blunt and flat curve. I'm just going to choose a round fan. I'm going to choose a number of bristles on this brush to be quite low, so I'm going to choose a low number, about 8. I'm going to change the length to be about 117%, and just the thickness to give it a little bit of texture. And then what I'm going to do is we can also get the shape dynamics, and you see here shape dynamics, the new brush projection is actually turned off, and that's because it's automatically built in. So as I increase the size of the brush and I tip the Wacom tablet, you can see the actual brush is starting to change as I move around. And the beauty of this tool is that I can change the amount of load I have on the pen. I'm going to choose very wet, so it's going to pick up everything from the background and repaint it. And I swipe through it, you can see now it's painted with a pink, and that's because I've got a loaded brush over here. So I'm going to change and clean the brush. At that point I can then change and pick up the background texture of my scene, pick up the background texture and repaint, in this case paint the model and paint some re-information. What I can do here is add in new texture into my image, so I'm just repainting each time. So you can see that I can have some really nice artistic effects to my picture. Okay, cool, that's the mixer brush. What I want to do now is just show you some new tools and new brushes. We have the erodible tips first of all, and the erodible tip looks like a pencil inside Photoshop CS6, and you can see that just here. If I choose that and look at the brush chip shape, you can see that on there I have the erodible square as default, but I can also choose different types of erodibility, and this is really to emulate pastel and charcoal in the real world. So I'm going to choose the round. You see actually in my brush preview, you see the round tip shape. Now what I can do is I can change the softness of this brush, and the idea is that I can brush, and when I'm brushing, the brush will start to erode. if I change the softness to be really soft, as I brush the tip, you'll see it really eroding quite rapidly. At any point in time I can then sharpen the tip, and sharpening the tip will put it back to where it originally was. Let me just change a different colour there. So a different colour. Now what I can do is I can erode this tip to a certain point where I like the look and feel of, and once I found that point I can then save the preset. What I can do first of all though is change the softness. So I'm going to change the softness back to 0, so it means it makes it really hard. Then go in and say I want to make a new brush preset and give it a name. And I can say something like Richard Fixed Erodible. So you can see how easy it is then for me to carry on with that preset and not have it change. What I also have that's new inside CS6 is called Brush Pose. And inside Brush Pose I'm able to override the pen by default settings. So I can override the tilt, override the y-axis, override the rotation, and override the pressure. So I can actually really fix it to give me a consistent look and feel. Another new tool inside the brush presets is the Airbrush. And the Airbrush tool, and I also have an Airbrush selected as well. I'm going to choose this airbrush down here, which I've just created to show you because it gives you a really nice effect. Now this airbrush has got on the brush tip shape, if I look at the brush settings, has got a nice size, a hardness which we can modify, a distortion of 100%, clearing out to 100%, a large splatter size. It's going to give us a nice splatter effect, so we can see that on the airbrush, which is typically what airbrushes do. Now you can see also brush projection is turned on for this brush as well, so when I move my tablet, move my pen on my tablet, you can see the shape of the airbrush changing as I move this around. And if I just put some text, put some colour into this panel, you can see the effect that the airbrush has on this canvas. So you get a really lovely splatter effect that you can then change by dialing down the splatter size, for example, and get different effects. And again, you can set a preset up so you get exactly the same preset. Now under shape dynamics, you can control the angle based upon the pressure of the pen. You can also change the color dynamics. So in color dynamics, you've got something new in CS6 called Apply Per Tip, and Apply Per Tip will enable you to have colors on that tip that are generated randomly based upon the hue and saturation. So at the minute the hue is turned right up, let's pull that down, let's put the saturation up slightly and the purity down, so the purity is the amount of grey that will be incorporated. And we push that now in, you can see there now it's much more subdued than it was before. I can also turn that back to the way it was before and take the Apply Per Tip, and that will mean that every time I make a stroke I get a single colour rather than the multiple colours on the Apply Per Tip, as you can see just now. Now whilst having this and having these new brushes, the airbrush, the erodible tip and the mixer brush, I'm also able to apply new filters. So under the filters panel we have the new oil painting filter. Now the oil painting filter came from Pixel Bender. It means that what I can do is I can apply different types of oil painting effects to this scene, change the amount of bristle detail, change the amount of angular direction and the amount of shine to give me a really nice different effect that I couldn't get before, not with a lot of hard work. I can also pick up my new filters and look at my new blur filters, and using the iris blur I can then incorporate different blur effects onto this image as well and change the amount of blur by altering the ring. And you can see here I'm introducing this new widget that we're calling an in context on canvas widget, which gives you a nice feel to the image as you're working on the image. Now while you have this and you're altering the blur effects of this scene that I have here, you may want to accentuate the lighting in here, which you can't do normally using the filters that we have already in Photoshop CS6. So these brand new filters enable you to modify the light coming into the scene. So for example, if I push up the light bokeh, I can introduce light into that scene. You can see there it's all starting to white out around these areas. But what I can do is introduce colour into those scenes as well, so naturally occurring colour in that white. But then what I can do is I can pull that back using the light range and change the colours that come in as part of this scene. So now you can see something completely different, and all this is rendered in real time, so then I can move this around and select something very, very different. And there's my final result, something really, really, really different. So thank you very much. That's the new brush features inside Photoshop CS6.
Let's take a look at the Intous 5 tablet within Illustrator CS6. The tablet, especially within Illustrator, has come on leaps and bounds, especially with all the different types of tools that we can actually use within it. What I do like using within Illustrator is things such as the Blob Brush. So again here, it's a little bit different compared to when you look at things such as Photoshop, but in terms of how you go off and configure the brush. So here, for example, I could take a paintbrush tool. I've got the Blob Brush tool actually underneath it. We'll look at the paintbrush tool at the moment, and again what we're looking at doing is looking at configuring that. So if we actually take a look at that brush, you can see that I can pick an individual brush. I can then go into a brush option, and with these different brush options that I actually have, you can see that we can actually change things such as the angle, the roundness and the size. Now at this present moment in time, what we have is fixed, random and fixed. What I want to do is I want to change the size of the brush, the thickness of that stroke that we're looking to create. So I want to use pen pressure. Now with all Intous tablets from many moons ago, we've always had the ability to use tilt, but we've also got things such as stylus wheel and rotation. Now if we look at things such as stylus wheel, you can actually utilize the brush, change the size of the brush actually using a stylus wheel on one of our airbrushes. Also, if we're looking at changing things such as the angle of this brush, so how we want it to change from side to side here, for example, we can use things such as rotation. But again here, that's actually going to be using one of our art markers to go off and do that. So let's take a look at just using and working with size. And with that size, I want to change that with pressure. What you can see here, I've actually got a 7-point brush at this present moment in time, but I can actually change the variation, how big I want it to be, by the same size again. So at the moment there's no variation actually on there, but I can actually make that go up to 7. So effectively I can actually double it. Also, we've actually got a box here. So this box actually tells me how big the brush could be or how small it can be. So basically I've actually got the brushes in 3 stages, from a normal size through to maximum pressure in terms of how big it's going to be, through to also the smallest size that we can actually have as well, which is quite important. So if I now go to my canvas, I click on OK to that, you can see that I've actually got my brush. So again here you can see that I can create some very, very light strokes, just like so, with my pen. I'm actually going to zoom in, so I'm actually going to use some of my shortcut keys that I've actually got on the tablet. So you can see I've actually got 4 shortcut keys. For me pressing the middle button, I can actually rotate through these, and one of them is auto scroll and auto zoom. So again here I should be able to scroll up, so I can actually change that as well. So while I'm using the pen in terms of drawing, I've actually got my weaker hand, which I'd normally use in terms of using my shortcut keys on here as well. I can actually use these on my tablet, and again if I do want to move around, I've actually got my pan tool there as well if needs be, so I can actually work with that too. So you can see here I can actually vary this brush stroke from being very, very small all the way to being as heavy as possible on that. And again, you know, we've got a lot of pressure sensitivity actually within that for us to work with. Also, what we've got is the ability to use bristle brushes. Now, bristle brushes are not exactly new, but they are amazing to work with, especially in a vector format. And Illustrator being a sister product of Photoshop, they work in a very, very similar way. So we can actually take an example of that, and if I actually click on this brush here, which is a mop brush, we should be able to actually see the different angles that we can go off and create. So this is a vector, and you can probably see that I'm actually tilting downwards, I'm actually tilting in the other way, so I'm tilting upwards, I'm tilting downwards, but also I can angle it from one side to another. So I should be able to now create some strokes just like so using the bristle brush. And because there's different types of bristle brush which are actually there, if you want to know where they are, it's quite easy, because all we need to do is go to a little icon right in the corner, and with that little icon we can actually go to Bristle Brush, and then we can actually open up the Bristle Brush library. So once we click on that, you can actually see that we've got all these brushes. Let me just pull that across. There we go. So we've got all these different brushes that we can actually go off and manipulate and work with. So every time I click into these now, you can probably see that's actually moving and going into my own brushes palette. There we go. Let me pull that down. Just like so. So if I do want to go off and manipulate them and work with them, I don't have to keep opening up the brush palette library all the time. So again, here I've got my rounds, and if I do want to go off and customize them, well, let's actually take a little look in there, shall we? You can see that we've actually got quite a lot of different options here. So again, we can vary the size, we can vary the bristle length, the stiffness, the opacity, actually here right on the fly. And again, a nice way of actually going into different brushes as well. We can do that here too, which is actually quite nice and quite clever, which is good. Okay, now what the Intous tablets have always been famous for are different types of tools. So we've also got things such as the 6D brushes. Now we've actually had these art markers around for a very, very long time. They first came out with Intous 3. So if we actually go off into our 6D brushes or art pens, again, let's take a look at those brushes. And with those brushes, you can actually see they do look like calligraphy brushes. Now, if I take a 27 as an example, with that 27, and again that's been added there as well, we can actually go off, look at those options, and you can see that they've actually put in some defaults already. So things such as the pressure sensitivity, things such as the bearing in terms of the movement, and also the rotation. So whenever I want to work with a brush like this, and again, if I cancel that out, and I'm going to hide that away as well, and get that to hide away for me as well, that's kind of what I want. When I'm physically rotating, in fact, let's pick a different colour as well, shall we? Let's do that, yeah. So I can physically rotate, and you can probably see this happening. So my fingers are rotating 360 degrees around the barrel. So this is actually rotating around with me. So apart from the pressure sensitivity and the tilt that you get in a normal pen, you've also got rotation built into the art marker, just like so. So in terms of your own creativity, you can go however you want within this. I mean, this has been within Illustrator, but again, you can do exactly the same thing within Photoshop as well. You know, the choices and what you can create is absolutely endless. I'd also want to talk about the Blob Brush as well. When I look at the Blob Brush, it makes your strokes, especially with a tablet, a lot easier to edit, and it creates, I would say, a natural way of modifying when you work with it. So let's take the Blob Brush, he says, and with the Blob Brush you should be able to see that I can actually go off and I can vary my strokes quite happily. Now when I'm using a Blob Brush like this, it does feel a little bit wet, so what I like to do is go into my Wacom Driver, and with my Wacom Driver And again, the Wacom Driver will live in system preferences if you're on a Mac. If you're on a PC, it's going to live in your control panel. And again, you can see that I've added my grip pen already. It's already seen my art pen. And with my art pen, I want to make sure that I've actually got a firmer tip when I work with it within Illustrator. So I actually have to physically add the application Illustrator into this. And this is the same for any type of graphics application. If you want to go off and tweak a specific graphics application, you can go off and add it, and it will give you the choice of if it's currently open, which Illustrator is, but if it wasn't, you can actually go off and you can browse for it, just like so. So I'm happy with that, so I can go OK, and you can actually see it now gives me an icon. So I can actually program for Illustrator, or I can program for all other applications. Now, with Illustrator, I want to make this tip a lot firmer. So when I actually go off and use my pressure sensitivity, it's going to take a lot more pressure for me physically on the tablet to go up to a maximum level of pressure. So now when I go back to using the Blob Brush, I've actually got a lot of control of what type of strokes I want to go off and create. Also, what's nice about that is if I turn my pen over, I can go off and erase. And I can erase through any part of this, and it remembers. It gives me the right line of thickness, how much I want to physically take off it. So let's actually zoom into that, shall we? Come on. So again, where you can actually see what I actually erased off in this area. Let's actually do that again. Let's take off a little section off there. So.
Wow, 16 gig.
Done. Okay. Wow.
16 gig.
We just filled it. Boom.
That's 3 sessions.
Yeah. Just filled it.
Check that out.
Christ.
So just go start from that one again. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
It rips through. Yeah.
Like no one's business.
Rips through it like no one's business.
Blimey. Okay, so we zoom back in, and you can actually see if I actually turn my pen over, it will turn into an eraser. And then again, what I can do, that's it, turn into an eraser. That's better. And you can see how we can actually just take away the little areas that we want to erase with the Blob Brush. So it works like vector paint. Very, very nice and very, very easy to do as well. Also, when it comes down to actually working with Illustrator, where a lot of people like to work with paths and everything else like that, the pens are very, very precise of where you can actually physically put those paths and how you can actually control those paths. So, for me, if we actually select all of this, and let's actually get rid of all of that, so we've actually got a nice clean area for us to work with. You can see that if we actually take the pen tool, like so, we can create some very, very nice strokes quite easily. And because we've actually got shortcut keys on the tablet themselves, and again here we can actually go off and see what shortcuts we might want to work with. So again here I might want to work with maybe a command key or control key, anything else like that. So again I can actually hold this and move everything together just like so. Or again, if I'm just going by touch and touch alone, I might want to use an option key. So again, with an option key I might want to create an anchor just on the fly. So again, with these shortcuts, just like how we've been working with the Intous tablets in the past, all of them can be programmed to be anything that you like, but I've not had to take my my eyes off the screen, because I can see what those shortcuts are physically going to be for me in terms of panning and zooming and everything else like that, which is good. So In terms of actually working with Illustrator, there's a number of things that we can conclude from this. One is using a pen, which can be very precise. We can use pressure sensitivity, and also we can use our shortcut keys to make our workflow a lot quicker and a lot faster and a lot better. Thank you very much.